Today I have a little gem from one of our access to information requests. Here's the simple question we asked of the Heritage Department. You can see our letter here. We asked for copies of any analysis done on the economic or financial impacts of Meta and Facebook removing Canadian news content since January 1st, 2023. I mean, that's a pretty simple request, right? I mean, Trudeau and his series of second-rate cabinet ministers in the Heritage Department, Stephen Guilbeault, Pablo Rodriguez, Pascal Saint-Onge, the latest, they've declared war on Facebook for some reason. Well, the reason is sort of obvious, isn't it? They want to milk hundreds of millions of dollars out of Facebook and divert those funds to their friends, their allies in the media party by forcing Facebook to pay any newspaper or TV station to which a user posts a link. Obviously, news companies love it when people link to them. I mean, we love it. It sends us traffic. People discover us. Maybe they sign up or even donate. Most newspapers and other media companies positively post their articles to Facebook for free and even pay to run ads on Facebook. They pay Facebook. It's such a benefit to the news companies. But Trudeau came up with the brilliant idea to make Facebook pay newspapers every time they link to the newspaper and send traffic to the newspaper. So Facebook did what they promised they would do if Trudeau brought in really what's a linking tax. They just stopped linking to newspapers in Canada or other news websites. Trudeau, Guilbeault, Rodriguez, Saint-Onge, all of them, they claimed that Facebook was stealing from those newspapers by linking to them and giving away a snippet of the news.
This is not just a dispute over advertising, it's also a dispute over democracy. It's a question of recognizing the role that internet giants like Facebook, Meta, Google, and others have in our lives, and therefore a responsibility that they also wield. As we've said, we're continuing constructive conversations with Google. Unfortunately, Facebook has just refused to recognize any sort of responsibility it might have in contributing to a democracy that has, democracies in general that have contributed to its success as a company, as a corporation. So we're not backing down on this. This goes to the core of a free and informed society that is able to take responsible decisions in a democracy. Citizens need to have access to quality local news, to quality content, to quality journalism that is properly paid, and the fact that that Facebook doesn't want to recognize the hard work of professional journalists across the country is something that undermines the very fabric of our democracy at a time where we're seeing democracy backslide around the world. So Canada and allies around the world are going to stand strong and demonstrate that we will not flinch in our defense of fundamental, foundational principles to democracy, like a free, quality, informed press.
All right. So if that's stealing, Facebook stopped linking to them. They stopped stealing as they promised they would. And that has cut off millions of visits a day to Canadian media. Just devastating and completely legal, by the way. The law, called C-18, says Facebook has to pay a link tax. Fine. If they don't link, they don't have to pay a link tax. It's completely lawful. What did Trudeau think would happen? And that's what we asked in our access to information request. What did Trudeau think would happen? Or did he even think about that at all? Does Trudeau think about anything at all? Do any of his airhead cabinet ministers think about anything? Remember this from Stephen Guilbeault.
There are two sides to the recommendations. There seems to be widespread acceptance that companies like Netflix or Facebook should start paying GST/HST. But the panel wants to force them, as part of their licensing rules, to pay part of their revenue to Canadian content. Isn't that, sir, the Netflix tax by another name?
No, not at all. I mean, as far as the GST or HST, depending on where you are in the country, is concerned, it's about fairness. I mean, companies are paying GST in Canada, and there's no reason that some of the wealthiest companies in the world who are operating on Canadian soil shouldn't pay for it. In terms of asking them to do their fair share to contribute to Canadian cultural content, I mean, you were talking about Netflix. Well, last year Netflix spent around $1 billion in Canada. And what we would be asking them to do, what the panel is recommending, and what we have said as a government many times before, is that they take part of that money to invest it in the development and the distribution of Canadian cultural content. But we're not asking them to do more. We're asking them to take a part of what they're already doing here and dedicate it to Canadian content.
What a disgrace. Yeah, so we actually asked for, I'll read it again, quote, copies of any analysis done on the economic financial impacts of Meta Facebook removing Canadian news content since January 1st, 2023. And we got back a 6-page document. That's not even as big as a brochure. It's just 6 pages, not 60 or 600 or 6,000 pages. Let me show it to you. There's no date on it, but we know from our request that it's this year, 2023. The headline is Memorandum to the Honorable Pablo Rodriguez, Platform Exit from the Online News Market. So remember, we asked for everything, anything about economic or financial impacts of going to war with Facebook. And this is all the government has, although we must acknowledge, given that it's the Liberals, they're probably lying and probably hiding any embarrassing documents from us illegally. Let me read a bit. On June 2nd, 2023, Meta announced it will block Canadian and non-Canadian news on Facebook and Instagram for between 1% to 5% of Canadian users for several weeks. So this is when they were doing a test run. In May of 2023, Google appeared before House and Senate committees stating they may block or limit access to news and search results should Bill C-18 receive royal assent. And then a couple of paragraphs are blacked out or grayed out. You can see there's a small text there. There's a number, 21(1)A. That's the section of the Access to Government Records Act that lets the government exempt things that meet this legal description. The head of a government institution may refuse to disclose any record requested under this part that contains advice or recommendations developed by or for a government institution or a minister of the Crown. So the staffer who was writing this memo was apparently making suggestions to the cabinet minister, and that's exempt. So we know this memo was published on or after June 2nd. They refer to something on June 2nd. So it's a pretty recent document. So that's the first thing. They hadn't done any studies or memos before that. But more to the point, you can see that they knew. Facebook couldn't have been any clearer about it. If the linking tax was brought in, Facebook and Instagram, which they also own, would simply stop publishing links to Canadian news. The government knew it. It's in this memo. I'll read some more. There are only a few pages. The next one is called International Momentum. It's a laugh. I'll read the first paragraph from it, and then I'll summarize the other paragraphs. International momentum to regulate platform sharing of news is growing. No, it's not. Stop lying. In the U.S., the California Journalism Competition and Preservation Act cleared an important hearing with bipartisan support in May of 2023. The California bill was recently introduced shortly after a similar federal bill failed to advance. This is called Momentum. If approved, it would direct digital advertising giants to pay news outlets a journalism usage fee when they sell advertising alongside news content. So that's California, the craziest, wokest state. I would think the law will be struck down under their U.S. First Amendment. I'll read just one more. They say, the United Kingdom is considering a digital markets competition bill. So they're considering it. That's considered Momentum. Introduced in April 2023, it would provide authority for pro-competition interventions in the digital news marketplace, although publicly hailed as providing opportunities for publisher remuneration. Unlike Australia and Canada, the UK bill does not specifically address issues related to the marketplace for online news. The expected impact on online news is therefore uncertain. That's all they got. They talked briefly about New Zealand, which has become extremely censorship-oriented under the failed leadership of their ex-Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. I remember her.
I've been watching for some days, and this is not unique to New Zealand, that in the midst of what is a global issue, as you would expect, there are a number of rumours that circulate. I am present on social media, or I see it myself. I cannot go around and individually dismiss every single rumour I see on social media, as tempted as I might be. So instead, I want to send a clear message to the New Zealand public. We will share with you the most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health. For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear, covid19.govt.nz. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. We will provide information frequently. We will share everything we can, everything else you see, a grain of salt. So I continue to share the message. New Zealanders must prepare, but do not panic, prepare. And when you see those messages, remember that unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth. And I really ask people, just visit covid19.govt.nz. It has all of the up-to-date information, and we will continue to provide everything you need to know.
Yeah. And then they refer to some semi-free countries, including Indonesia and South Africa, and that's it. That's what they call momentum. A few proposals from some woke cranks that'll probably be struck down by the courts, a few authoritarian regimes, but no one is doing what Canada has done, not even dictatorships. I laugh that this page is titled International Momentum, but it shows how far out of international norms Trudeau's censorship and media regulation agenda is. Let me just show you this next page. It shows what happened when Australia tried a similar idea a few years ago. Facebook simply stopped linking to news there too. So they just absolutely, obviously knew what was going to happen. Justin Trudeau and his list of failed heritage ministers absolutely knew what was coming. There's just one more page in the memo. I may as well read it. It's called International Precedents. Let me read a bit because it shows how nuts these ideas are. This one's pretty incredible. In 2022, France became the first country to implement the European Union's copyright reform, granting press publishers a right to ask for payment when their content is displayed on online platforms. In response, Google no longer displayed press publishers' content within its search results unless such display was authorized by the press publishers as free of charge. So you know how when you search for something on Google, it gives you the link and then just a sentence to sum up what's on the page? Very, very brief, right? Like when you search Google News for, say, the words Trudeau and Nazi, this is what you see. It's no surprise. It's a Google search, right? But we take for granted that it gives you one sentence about what you're going to see. That's how you make the decision if you want to click the link, right? So the headline, a clickable link, and a one-sentence summary of the story. And then you click through if you are interested. That's amazing opportunity for newspapers. People pay for that. They do something called SEO, search engine optimization. Everyone's trying to make their newspaper get to the top of the first page, right? It's the first link. It's lifeblood to a newspaper. But what happened in France after the great government intervention is the Google News result I just showed you from Canada, which lets you read the first sentence of the story so you know what it's about. France is so super smart that they implemented a law that says Google has to pay to do that. So now Google will just have the title and the link, but it won't tell you what the article is about because otherwise Google would have to pay for the pleasure of doing so, which would destroy the internet and the whole part of the internet. Could you imagine telling Google they have to pay to put someone in their search results? Pay people to be in the list, which people love to be in. Imagine thinking, let's make them pay people to show up in their rankings. And they call this international precedence. What a disastrous precedent. They had this precedent from Australia. In February 2021, Facebook pulled news services from Australia in response to proposed legislation, which included the removal of government pages and government-provided COVID-19 vaccine information. Look at this item from the memo. In late 2014, Google News closed in Spain for 8 years in response to the country's legislation that forced it to pay a collective licensing fee to republish headlines or snippets of news. For 8 years, Google would not show any news to people in Spain. And that's what the government bureaucrats said about that. Let me read. Studies from Spain suggest that the net effect of online news services being removed is that citizens had less access to news. Oh, you think? You think? In addition, as a result of removing Google News from Spain, large publishers saw an increase in direct traffic to their websites and increased revenues, whereas small publishers saw a decrease in revenues, likely due to decreased referral traffic from Google News. Oh, so in Canada, the CBC and the Toronto Star would win, but any small guys, and for sure any independent guys, would lose. Got it. And that's it. I just took you through the end of the memo. That's all there is. Just to read our access to information request again, we want to quote, copies of any analysis done on the economic financial impacts of Meta, Facebook, removing Canadian news content since January 1st, 2023. And that is it. 6 pages, really just 4 pages with some minor redactions. They have no studies. They did no studies. They don't care. They don't think about it. It's just not important to them. They're not really good at doing anything, the Liberals. From foreign affairs to running a military to making airports work to vetting Nazis. They're just not good at doing things. They're good at spin. They didn't even care to study, even a small in-house study, even like asking an intern to do a study, what the effects on Canadian media would be economically, what the effects on the economy would be by driving out Facebook and Instagram, the lifeblood of Canadian news. How much damage do you think they've done already? Over time, probably hundreds of millions of dollars worth of traffic. But of course, the big guys will be okay. They were in Spain when they shut down Google News for 8 years. And Trudeau, well, he'll bail out his friends. He'll take taxpayers' money to give to the CBC and the Toronto Star. The rest, the independent guys, the small guys, they'll be decimated. The Liberal government didn't know the economic cost. They didn't care. They still don't care. We literally got that access to information request back yesterday. As of yesterday, they still haven't bothered to do an economic impact study. You know, there's a saying, don't ascribe to malice what can be ascribed to ignorance or just a mistake. No. Not after 8 years. After 8 years in this Liberal government, after censorship laws and regulating the media, we can conclude that this is on purpose. Trudeau wants there to be only 2 types of news media in Canada. Government-controlled news media that he will subsidize, and government-banned media that he will prosecute. Stay with us for more.